Welcome to Feminine Power Time. Turn off the chatter and tune in to what matters. This is Christina Rilo, your host, and today I want to welcome you into a very special episode with a woman who is near and dear to my heart. Her name is Pele Rouge, and she is the co-founder of the Center for Timeless Earth Wisdom. And she's also one of my primary teachers. She has been in my life for over 20 years. She has taught me everything from how do I actually slow down to working with the cycles to how to be in relationship with life. I like to call these episodes Tea with an Elder or Wisdom Teas, where we get a chance to really sit down and be in conversation with someone, in this case with Pele, about what they've learned as they've been on this planet for many decades. And not from a place of telling us something, but from a place of sharing with us. And I invited Pele specifically because there's so many different realms that she can speak to us through the realms of timeless earth wisdom. So as we jump into or dive into, let's not jump, as we kind of flow into our conversation is really kind of shine a light on what is timeless earth wisdom and why does it matter? And give us some context for what is we're seeing in this world and what's happening to help us orient and to help us understand so that we can find and keep our center. There's some beautiful natural laws of how the universe and how this planet works that she will share with us, as well as some good inquiries and just what I like to call some Pele wisdom bites that I take in my pocket. So I invite you into this conversation. You know what we do here is we reimagine the way we in the world work from the inside out. And we do that by marrying together wisdom, well-being, and leadership. So may what we conversate on today bring you some wisdom bites, some hope biscuits, and some ways to move in these times that we're all part of. Okay, you ready? All right, let's go meet Pele. Pele, I want to welcome you, and I'm so happy to be with you here for this conversation. We have many people with ears and eyes tuned in. And one of the things that I always say is that this is not an interview. This is a conversation and a space, which of course I learned from you 20 some years ago about the sacredness of creating space to string the beads, connect, and I'm just really grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful that you've been on the planet for many, many, many years, gathering lots and lots and lots of wisdom. No pressure for today.
Oh,
Oh, so I mean, I have known you for many, many, many years, and I think it's always good when having a conversation to know, the people that are listening. Obviously, hopefully, they know who I am. But I would love to just take a couple minutes before we really dive into our conversation to just get a sense of who you are and what's important to share with everyone. One from just the perspective of what is earth wisdom. It's something that I had no idea existed, like as a thing, a real thing, until I met you. But I'm curious of that as a lineage. I know that you have walked in for many years. If you could share a little bit about that, and then whatever feels important to share about your story and how you know what your what how you find yourself here to be here with us today.
okay. Thank you, Christine. I think I'd like to start with something that came through many, 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 many years ago, because it is the ground out of which the Earth Wisdom teachings come. And it goes like this: My patterns are the patterns of the universe. My patterns are the patterns of the universe. My rhythms, the rhythms of all time. Lie quietly with me, become me, and all patterns, all rhythms, all time. That's sort of like a cosmological view of life. And indigenous wisdom, as I have experienced it and walked with it, comes from those. those of us humans who have walked on Earth for thousands of years. And a part of that journey, an important part of that journey was to observe life, to observe how life works. What are the patterns that govern life? How does Mother Life, in the form of the natural world of which we are a part, but which we often experience or sometimes experience as other than we are, those more than human forms of life, how are they a reflection of those patterns of the universe? It's much like seeing that all of life is a hologram. It's a reflection in terms of pattern of the laws that govern all of life. And our indigenous relatives, not being stupid, but being very, 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 very wise people, said, "Oh, if this is what the larger patterns of life are like, then it probably makes good sense for us as humans to honor those patterns, to honor those rhythms, to be in alignment with them. Because if we're in alignment with the larger rhythms, then we're working with life itself rather than life against itself." So for me, indigenous wisdom is that those learnings that have occurred through time that are really timeless and that govern the principles, the laws of life on Earth herself, and that in turn are a reflection of how the cosmos works,
Mhm.
because the laws on Earth are, laws that come into 3D form, but they exist in other realms, that same pattern, those same rhythms in the cosmos. So that's how I would define Earth wisdom, or how I hold Earth wisdom
Mm.
teachings.
One of the reasons I was excited to be able to have this conversation with you, with everyone, is that I've had the benefit of learning from these teachings for you for over 2 decades, and I also know that you were born in America and the middle of America, and I think grew up on a farm. Is that right?
That's accurate. Yes. Yeah.
And
I
I'm just
grew up. I
having.
was
Oh,
I was I was blessed to grow up on a
Mhm.
farm, and a farm on land that my family has stewarded for over 150 years. So the seventh generation is now growing up on the same land that my grandfather was born, my father was born. I happened to be born in a hospital. But it's that pattern of connectedness, of stewarding land, and of learning what is it to be in direct relationship with land. And that was just an amazing, amazing gift. I was allowed to be what they call they talk about free range chickens. Well, I was allowed to be a free range child. And that's a gift that every kid should have.
Mhm. I'm just now putting the parallel together that growing up that way on the earth with the land, being a free range child, with your many, many years of study and with your teachers, and then moving through receiving all of the medicine of the earth wisdom. Like you were like you I'm just having like this epiphany of how they're so you probably already had this epiphany of them being so connected that
Yeah,
they were born into that and kind of what would call a modern culture, but then also initiated into the teachings from the indigenous lineage as well.
right. Because from there, I went on this journey. I ended up, my first real job was at the University of California at Santa Cruz, where I was um, hired. So it was an academic appointment. I was hired to bring together the voices in the world, which were largely at that time academic voices that were giving voice to the awareness that the Newtonian world of separation was fine in relationship to things that are in physical form, but that there was a whole other level of reality that existed, that came out of quantum physics, and And in that world, it was no, it's not a world of separation. It's not a world of separate forms. It's, oh, by the way, everything is related, everything is connected. It's, it's Indira's web. It's it's Merlin Sheldrake, now the scientist who has written this book called Entangled Life. It's about the entanglement of life, but life in supportive relationship with itself, with one another. And so, we were bringing in physicists, scientists, biologists, artists who were sensing but giving voice to, guess what, everybody? It's not a world of separation, it's a world of oneness and interrelatedness. And what does that mean then in terms of how we structure our culture? Because our culture, our societal patterns, um, had come into form believing that things are separate. I mean, some of you who are older may remember that as late as the 70s and the 1970s, we still held the belief that the mind and the body were two separate things, and that one of them didn't impact the other. So we created a health system in which some people cared for the mind. You had psychologists and psychiatrists, and some people cared for the body. And it was like that kind of, and I mean, I'm old enough to remember, that one of the local medical societies said, no, there's no proof. There's no proof that the mind impacts the body and that the body impacts the mind. Well, of course, we know that's not so now. But this shift from our structures, our societal structures, being one in which we assumed that the ultimate nature of reality was one of separation, to now moving to no, it's all interrelated. And how do we work with that? How do we restructure ourselves with that awareness when that's not our experience? English is a language of nouns, it's a language of objects. And so that's how we're trained to see, those of us who are native English speakers, because our language impacts our perception. Whereas indigenous languages are languages of verbs, they're verb based. And a verb based language is one that is all about movement. It's all about flow. It's all about, you know, one thing just merging into another. And so, our indigenous brothers and sisters have always seen life as interconnected, always have seen it as an interrelatedness. And for those of us, um, typically in Western cultures, that's not our experience. And so, this is a time, and I think there are some things about the nature of this time that are really important to understand,
Mm,
um, if we're going to make sense of the current chaos that many of us experience in the world at this time.
yeah.
Because it's like we're going through a detox. We're going through, you know, the, there's a saying that love brings up all unlike itself to be healed.
Mm.
Love brings up all unlike itself to be healed, from A Course in Miracles. And for me, what that represents is that anything that is not in alignment with the larger laws of life is now coming up, is now being made visible. We're becoming aware of it, and it's an invitation from life to, humans, get your act together and come back into the beauty of life itself, into the flow of life, into the patterns of life. Because if you don't, then you're going to be experiencing what we're experiencing right now with climate change, with um, this sense of separation and all those kinds of things.
All the things, all the things. I sometimes I say, I don't understand why we as humans have to take the hardest route through everything. And then I'm like, oh, right. I remember when I resisted and I didn't want to wake up and I didn't want to look and I certainly did not want to go inside. Like, no, 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 don't
Mhm.
don't really want to, dive into that. And so that's how I when I am on my good days, I find the compassion to remember what we're seeing at the meta is what I know I
Yeah.
experienced in my own self at the age of, 28, 29, where I was like, nope, 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 not waking up, not waking up, don't want to look. And so one of the things that we talked about for today is this is it's we've been working with a model, Pele, and I mentioned this to you when we first started today, that I think this kind of downloaded for me, right? It's probably like right around 2020. And it was this notion of we're going through a transformation and it's happening. Like you can't stop the birth. The
Mhm.
birth is happening, whatever metaphor you want to use, but there's a transformation happening and we have a choice of how we go through the transformation. And somehow I stumbled upon this connection between the word sacred with transformation. And when you put them together, the word sacred means devoted to wholeness without violence to self or others from a place of respect. So if you put sacred with transformation, it is transformation devoted to wholeness without violence to self or others, with respect. And and of course, I didn't make this up. I just happened to put the two words together as I
Mhm.
do. And it just brought me to this place of like, like, wow, well, like, what could that look like? What does that look like if we're going through something, um, transformation in a sacred way, which is not what is totally happening, what is not happening on the bigger picture that we're looking at.
Mhm.
But where do we have the power within ourselves to choose that? And so I'm curious, we can kind of, for today's conversation, we can go down any one of these portals you get to choose. So I'll lay them out and then you decide which way you wanna take us. One is to start off of like, how do we just you can't you can't get to that place of, "Oh, let me go through the transformation, through wholeness," when you're freaking out on the inside and your entire nervous system is like, "What is going on?" And you are in the waves, right? So there's like the context that timeless wisdom and all of the wisdom traditions give us to take a step back and actually understand, because there needs to be some context for us to understand how do we make sense of this so we can interact with it. And then
Okay,
there's yeah,
so
yeah.
before we go to the next place, just it's helpful from an indigenous perspective, from an earth wisdom perspective. Humans are spirit beings. That's our essence. We're spirit beings who came here to learn and to grow. That's who we are. Okay. And another concept that's important, that's essential, is that all of life is sacred. All of life is sacred. And another piece that's really important is that creation is flow. Creation is an ongoing unfolding. And so, as humans, when we find if we're here to learn and grow, and the world that we have created for ourselves, because increasingly the world in which we live is one of human creation, then whatever we're experiencing, this like, oh my God, I didn't mean this or I didn't mean that, like it's a lesson to learn from and to grow from. And those disturbances, those things that we resist, those things that we say, no, I don't want, I don't want it to be this way. I want it to be some way else. But it's like that is the path. Whatever if we accept that all of life is sacred, and therefore as a human being I am sacred, and my brothers and my sisters of all forms, human and otherwise, are also sacred beings, then part of the response to going through this time together is to remember that, and when our backs against the wall, it's hard to remember that. It's hard to not want to strike out, but it's like, oh, this is who we are, and this is here, as a lesson in one sense for me to learn. I mean, if you've been around children, you know that at various stages in their life they absolutely resist everything. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, it's like no, 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 before they can get to yes, yes, yes. As teenagers, it's no, no, no. As parents don't know anything, no, no, no. And we get into our 20s and it's like, oh well, my parents did know something. And by the time we're 30s, we have a lot of compassion for our parents usually. So that place of um, all of life is sacred, and that we're here to learn and grow, and therefore to have compassion for ourselves and for one another. It's not about being conscious is not about being perfect. It's not that perfection is not about never making a mistake. Perfection is never making a conscious mistake, and if we do make a mistake, we just acknowledge it, and we go on from there. So these sort of fundamental things about life itself are really important to remember, because in this time of so much outer chaos, they can become um, like the rudder. They can become the anchor for us to ground ourselves again. And it's like, oh yes, I remember. I'm here to learn and grow. And this, whatever this thing that is in front of me, is something that I can learn from, that I can grow from. I mean, if you look at the fruit basket upset nature of our government right now, it's like, wow, everything we thought we could count on is being is in a place of upheaval. What can we count on? Well, what we can count on is that life is a flow, that life is an ongoing creation, that I am a part of creation, that part of my job here is to co create with life in time and space on Earth. That's part of my job, however that is. And if I do it in alignment with the laws of life, then life itself is supporting me. It's like life's job is to support life. I'm a part of life. So therefore, life is supporting me. I just need to slow down enough and pay attention enough to allow me to experience its presence in my life. Because when change is happening, if we're moving so fast, as things are right now, and in the U.S., we are absolutely addicted to speed, totally addicted to speed. And underneath speed, from my perspective, is this fear that a lot of the sense of speed is like, if I don't keep up, if I don't move as fast as as the tech world wants us to move, I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to and underneath all of that is I'm going to die. I'm going to be abandoned. And um, and life doesn't move at that speed. It just simply doesn't move at that speed. And life itself takes time. And when we're addicted to speed, we don't create the spaciousness in which life can transform itself graciously. It takes 9 months for a child to come into form. 9 months, that's a long time.
Mm,
And we expect and we want things to change overnight. And sometimes they do,
mhm,
but change within ourselves often takes longer. So this whole notion of sacredness and of getting through this time is to find part of it is to find a way to slow down in my own life, to make spaciousness for myself. It's about self-care. It's about what do I need to do to be able to stay in my own center. And if I find myself not in my center, what do I do? What do I know how to do to go back and restore it? Whether it's sleep, whether it's meditation, whether it's a walk in the forest, whether it's, going into the ocean and allowing the waves, that rhythm, that patterns, to the extent that we can put our body in the patterns of life itself, it just naturally grounds us. So we just go, Oh,
Mm,
okay.
mhm,
That's one last piece, and then I want to I want to hear where we want to go next. One of the what I find these days is that the things that I need just start to come to me. They they just do, like out of intention, out of my intention is has been for the last 50 years to understand, how does this all work? How does life work? And how does it fit together? And what am I not seeing? And we've all heard, this notion of the beginning of the universe it's been called the Big Bang. The Big Bang. It's this explosion, and it's done. And there's a Oxford trained woman cosmologist who says, "No, I don't think it was that way." And she has all kinds of wonderful evidence, but she says, "I think it's much more like the big breath rather than the Big Bang." And the big breath is one of breathing out and then of breathing in. It's this place of giving and receiving, but not from a transactional place, or a monetary place. It's much more like if we just take our human breath. As we breathe out, the trees, life forms, plants are breathing in, and they're breathing in carbon dioxide, which gives them life. And then guess what are they breathing out? They're breathing out oxygen, which gives us life. So when we look at the natural world, what we call nature, that's the kind of exchange that's going on.
mhm,
And trees don't get nervous about being trees, or about where is the carbon dioxide going to come from. For me, it's there in the flow of life. And so part of this shift, and this is part of where the whole feminine comes in, is in this area of spaciousness, of patience, and of shifting from a transactional nature of a culture of this for that. I give you money and you give me this, and if I don't have the money, then I don't receive it. But breathing in and breathing out has nothing to do with money. It's a natural pattern in life itself. And so, in returning to those natural patterns, we find that life is supporting us, and we don't have to do so much. We don't have to work so hard. We find that, oh, life is supporting me. And I learn how to, in one sense, to relax enough, to move slowly enough. And that's not to say you don't ever have to move fast. Absolutely, you got to move fast at times. But I allow myself to tune into the larger rhythms of life that are there to carry me, to hold me, to nurture me, to support me.
mhm. Everyone can just go ahead and just breathe that breathe that in. I was saying you all to Pele before we started how happy I was to be here with her because I always feel more calm, and I just naturally slow down when I'm in your presence. Always have, and one of the things that I love and appreciate about you, Pele, is that you bust the myth just by being yourself that to go slow is to kind of to be weak, and or
Yeah.
to breathe into the body. Sure, that's good for yoga class, but it's like the brain has the power versus the body informs the brain, and the cadence at which you speak and the depth. I mean, that's what I think I really appreciate, is that you've been a mentor. I call you my spiritual mother and mentor. I don't know if you know this. And also I'll call you call me grasshopper. So to me, it's we need many mothers, I think, in this life. I think and so
Yeah.
you've taught me just like a mama bird would teach the baby bird of from a place of resonance of like what does that feel like, being on retreat with you or being, with you in many different ways. It gave me a way to tune my own resonance into that because
Hmm.
I think we get it mentally, like, yes, okay, slow down, okay, take a pause, and now it's been made cool and hip, and, like, you got the magazines, and you got the clothes that go with it, and all the things, which is beautiful at some level, but it also takes it and kind of it makes it superficial versus really bringing it into the depths of an embodied practice and way of being, and a way of living, and and so I just wanted to point that out to everyone. One of the reasons I wanted Pele to be with us today is to just really feel your resonance. You're not trying to be anything. You're not. It's not even. I mean, the words you're saying are awesome, but it's really the who you are that took all the time that it did for you to be who you are in this moment. That then as an instrument we can tune to. Oh, this is what that feels like, and then not to mimic you, but to find that then in ourselves, because I can
Mhm.
feel what that feels like, and I remember
Mhm.
there was a retreat, it was one of the dreaming retreats in January, and we were out in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I was sitting with you under a blanket on your bed looking out at this big redwood tree, and I think you were probably saying, as you often do, "You know, Rilo, slowing down would be good. Slowing down, slowing down." So and I was like, "Did I get it yet? Did I get it yet?" And you just laughed. You're like, "Well, you're making progress, let's just say." And I remember just looking at that tree and I was like, wow, this tree is so big and so mighty and so strong. And it just grows kind of slow, it has a slowness. There's a strength to the resonance of the slowness that I I'm curious what your perspective is. I'm going to go a little, not Darth Vader, but a little bit in this way of there is this, call it the matrix, call it the overculture, that makes it very challenging to live your life in that way of creating the rhythms and the cadence, because the matrix is so strong to pull you out of that. And I was thinking maybe it would be uh,
So how do we do that?
well, I was almost like
Yeah.
even like from, yes, that and like the perspective through the lens of power, because there is this, I don't know what I'm curious what your metaphor would be when we kind of take a step back, as the wise ones do, to observe like what's actually happening here. I mean, that's what happens to me when I slow down and I can observe, then I find the wisdom of how to interact with what's happening without just getting caught up into the chaos of it. So if I believe that I can trust life, or at least I'm practicing it, which it's currently my mantra, this probably for the
Mhm.
next, well, the rest of my life on the planet. But like that I can really practice that. There are these, there is this power thing that's happening that feels like part of the lesson that we're all receiving. And I'm curious from both the medicine teachings as well as your own experience as a woman, as well as through the lens of the feminine, because there has been these, things have been said like, well, we're just too compassionate, and the feminine is trying to demasculate the masculine, which are, and we need to be more rational and logical, and not, in our hearts, like, these are things that are happening, and seeing things that they're not, to me, they're not about politics, they're about people and humans and planet. And so curious, I've never really, I don't think, talked specifically about power, but I'm curious your
Yeah.
perspective on it and what wisdom might emerge for us.
Well, when I was probably in my 20s, I realized that I came here this lifetime to experience what it was to be female. What is it to be woman? That when I was growing up, I um, I spent most of my time on the land or with animal creatures because they made much more sense to me than humans. I did not understand humans. I didn't feel very human. It was like being dropped into some place where I looked like humans, but it was like, well, I don't know anything about this form of humanity. And so I came here, I realized, oh, I came here to experience what is it to be female? What is it to be a woman? That was one thing. And then the other thing is, what is feminine power? I came here to learn about that, and how's it different than masculine power? Because, I'm in my 80s now, and in the world that I grew up in, it was like the place that looked like it was fun and interesting. That was interesting to me was the masculine world. That's where the action was. I wasn't about to just stay home and cook and have children and do. I mean, I have children, but that was like, no, that's not where the action is. The action's out there. And so, I've lived with that, and I still live with that question, my whole life. What is it to be feminine? Because I learned 10 years ago, just about the time I think, well, I knew that. It's like, something happened that was like, oh no, Pele, you're just in sort of a new doorway of understanding. And I think that's how life is. That's what consciousness is. As we become increasingly conscious, we have our awareness expands. So we see whatever it was that we've seen before from in a broader framework, a broader perspective. And it's like, oh, it's this, or it has that. So um, there's so many ways to talk about feminine power. I mean, first of all, I think probably every woman knows the seductive nature of feminine power. And it's like if you look at a flower blossom, the flower blossom is sitting there in all its rich, fecund juiciness.
Mm.
And guess what happens? A bee shows up or an ant to pollinate it. And all that the flower did was just be who it was. Now, so if there's any invitation that I could give to, to
Mm.
women,
Mm.
it would be just discover who you are and be that, because part of the feminine nature is this seductive piece, because it's a part of how. I mean, why would the masculine come to the feminine if there weren't this place of amazing on earth, of amazing sights, smells, sensuousness? It's like, well, of course, you'd be stupid not to come, because that that's complete. I mean, life on earth is this dance between the masculine and the feminine. And so, feminine power. I mean, I have three daughters. And one of the things that I felt responsible for teaching my daughters was about this seductive nature of the feminine, but it has to be used with integrity. It's easy to manipulate with seduction, with that aspect of who we are. But that path of seduction, unless it's used in alignment with the sacred and with sacred law, leads to things that are harmful and hurtful and painful and wounds and all kinds of things. So there's that aspect of the feminine. And then um, there are other things like our intuition, our sensing of um, that which is coming into form but is not yet in form, our telepathic capacities, all of those things for which we are only recently beginning to be able to measure. Because in the Newtonian world, something didn't exist unless it was measurable. And so much of what the feminine is not measurable. How do you measure the love and care that is, and compassion, that are all feminine aspects? And not to say that they don't exist in the masculine. I'm not saying that at all. um, but what they do, I mean, the feminine is all about nurturing life. It's about bringing life forward, whether it's in the form of a child or any other form of creation. That's the feminine. I mean, the earth has always been held as feminine, and there's also, and that our wombs are in one sense, made after the pattern of the cosmic womb of of the universe, and that is the feminine. The feminine's job is to bring life into form. The job of the masculine, whether in a male or female body, is to protect life. And it's like it's very simple. The feminine is simple in that inordinately complex, but it's also simple. The job of the feminine is to bring life into form. The job of the masculine is to protect life once it is here in form. And the feminine power is a way of also of seeing horizontally, of seeing the interrelatedness of everything, and of knowing that everything matters. And if we remember that our basic understanding of reality right now is changing, that it's shifting from this place of separation to the place of connection, and that what the earth is missing right now, what government is missing, is this understanding. Or it's not an understanding, but that everything is connected. It's all related. And therefore, what I do matters. Who I am matters. I am a co creative aspect of life itself. And some say that creator or source created humans because source wanted people to play with. It wanted people to co-create with. And the feminine is all about this process of co-creation. That's an enormous, enormous power. And what we as women, and certainly in these last decades, have had to do in order to, in one sense, fight for and claim our space at the table of worthiness, to speak, was we had to, as Oki Simene Forrest said, we had to learn how to dress ourselves in masculine ways. Because if we couldn't be as good as what the masculine was doing, if we didn't learn to develop some of those capacities of promoting ourselves and of having all of the credentials that we needed, we weren't allowed at the table. Well, we've done that. We've proven that, and now that has created a space. I mean, if you look at government now, you have lots of voices, not as many as we need, but you have lots of voices of the woman, of the feminine, because it's not just in the female body, but of the feminine showing up everywhere. And this place of creation requires a balance between the masculine and the feminine of who we are. And it's our job, in one sense. Now we're insisting because life on earth depends upon that feminine voice of care, of compassion, of interrelatedness, of caring for life. Life on earth depends upon those voices being heard, and those voices being part of the decision making process. um there's another piece that you asked about, um that skips me right now, but it'll come back.
Yeah. Well, first of all, everyone, just I feel like take a little shake, shake. That was like a lot of good stuff. You want to just shake it all in, shake it all in. Um, it's I
One piece,
yes,
Christine,
yes,
that might be helpful
yeah,
is there are two sacred laws in the tradition that I carry, and only two, which I think is fascinating. The first sacred law is that everything is born of woman. All things are born of woman. That's just how it is. And the second law is no law shall be passed that will harm the children. Those are the laws of life herself, itself. And mother life, as I learned, I had a profound experience with years ago. Um, she's a fierce
yeah.
mother. you know,
The Cheshire
it's like,
grin on your the grin of, the grin on your face.
yeah, whatever. It's like, okay, human, as long as you're here and you're supporting life and whatever, but if you're not supporting life, as far as mother life's concerned, it's like you don't need to be here. So
Mhm,
figure out whatever your way is of supporting life, and do that. Because if life ceases to exist, well, life ceases to exist. So if we see the feminine as the bringers of life and the masculine as the protectors of life once it's here. That's from Mother Life's from in Mother Life's book. That those are our job descriptions in whatever way we choose to carry those out. And there's a saying um, that humans are but one instrument in the ongoing orchestra of life, and our job is to keep ourselves in tune, to know who we are and to do what's needed to keep ourselves in tune, and then to play accordingly with the rest of life.
mhm, mhm,
That's our job description, no matter,
mhm,
whatever we are. So this place, I mean, if there's anything that I want the women or the people who are listening to this to, to know and to believe and to trust, is the beauty of who they are. I mean, source doesn't make things that aren't beautiful, that don't matter. I mean, that's just not how life works. We all have a place, and it's our job, to first of all to discover, well, what kind of an instrument am I in this orchestra of life? What are my gifts? And then where's the place where those gifts can be received?
mhm,
And how do I learn to play, sort of in exquisite harmony with all of the other forms of life? Because that's where the fun is. That's where creation is going.
mhm,
It's going from this hierarchical top down place to a much more horizontal place of co creation. And dominance is exhausting. And dominance has gotten us where we are. Well, and it's like, this does not work very well.
mhm,
Just ask climate, just look at what's happening. It's like that all comes out of dominance. That all comes out of a lack of respect for life itself and for how life works. And when we move from this place of dominance to co-creation, the gift is, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be responsible for everything. My job is to be the sort of like the clearest, it's like, who is it? Hafiz, somebody said, to become a flute on the lips of God, to become a flute on the lips of life itself, to the extent that I can be who I am and give my gift as clearly with as little schmutz on the windows of, perception and belief as possible, then that's my gift. And then it's like, it's a place of, like, I don't have to work so hard because I don't have to do everything. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be everything. My job is just to be myself and play in accordance with the rest of life. And then that gets to be fun.
mhm, mhm.
And it gets to be so much, so much easier.
Well, I wanna triple, 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 triple underline for everyone here what Pele is talking about is not a platitude, it's a practice and it's a perspective. Um, I think that what I mean by that is, and Pele, you can disagree, say nothing, whatever you wanna do with what I'm about to say. Um, it is in, whatever the chaos making machine is, but that we do, growth happens for whatever reason. We have to go through. We'll call it the goo, or I like the dragonfly metaphor myself, with like you're swimming
Hmm.
around in the water. You don't even know you're in the water. You don't even understand that you're in the water. One day you attach yourself to a reed. You're like, I'm gonna climb up, and I'm gonna climb up this reed, and I'm gonna elevate. And you climb up, you elevate out of what you can't see, and all that subconscious stuff that's running us. You attach to the reed, you climb up, and then your exoskeleton drops off, and your wings pop out, and then you have to sit there for a while and let them dry. So what we're talking about is, I remember early on when I moved from Chicago to California after I finished my traditional education and began my wisdom education. One of my first healers said, she said, "Christine, you're really fortunate. You're going to have a long runway to wake up and remember who you are and strengthen your internal muscles and all of the things." She goes, "But we're going to come to a day when it's like the pressure and the chaos is so intense. People are just going to freak out." And the yogis talked about this. The yogis, part of the reason they opened up the doors to different things in the 70s was because they knew this time was coming. And
Hmm.
so I look around and I'll say to Noah, "Oh my God," I'm like, "I get destabilized. I get off my center." And I have been meditating for 20 years. I have a daily pranayama practice. I live by the rhythms, like all of the things. And so if I'm being destabilized, and I can go into that place of like, "Oh my God, we're doomed." Like this is where like after like this whole thing, all those places. And I can watch myself because of the 20 years of training in my mind and my heart and my body, just like an athlete. I can watch it go out, and I know how far to let it go out, and I know how to create support. I have support structures around me. In my communities, we have a saying: "Wise women may wobble, but we don't fall down." And if sometimes we lay down, and if we're going down like a helicopter, we reach out for a wisdom or a love line. So I have these things, and I think that like expecting that we're going to wobble, we're going to have days where we just want to lay down, we're going to have things where the chaos, for me, looking around and just seeing humanity in the ways it chooses greed or ignorance or false safety, instead of like, oh my gosh, if the human heart could just awaken, and just open, we could move through this transformation with so much more grace and so much more compassion. And I was reading a book recently that I found through Barbara Marx Hubbard book, Conscious Evolution, called The Cultural Creatives. And he was quoting Harriet Tubman, who said, "I would have freed," something like this is a paraphrase, "I would have freed more slaves if only they had known they were slaves." And I think about that in terms of when I was doing my research and overwhelmed and over it, of just like we can't see the water that we swim in. We don't see the matrix that we
Hmm.
swim in. And whether it's because, well, there's so many reasons, so many layers of that can take years to kind of move through. That I think that I'm curious about. There's like this piece of acknowledging there are forces that don't want things to change, and we can focus over there,
Absolutely.
right? And we can get
Yeah.
outraged about it, but then if we are outraged, there's a certain way of outraging that it takes our energy. Ann
Hmm.
Richards, the former governor of Texas, she shared with her daughter-in-law, one of her wisdoms was, "Don't let them steal your chi." And so it's like, how do we show up in that fierce mother, fierce grace place of what I would call not on my watch? Like, not
Hmm.
on my watch is this the way we're going. But I know if I go directly at it, I will waste my chi and I will exhaust myself, and or I will end up
Yeah.
in a pit of despair and feeling disempowered. So then I had to pull back and say, okay, what's my part? and
Hmm.
and how what can I co-create? What's mine to do, and who do I need around me to do it with? Because oftentimes I can feel like I'm the lone orca, and it's like I got to go out there
Hmm.
and do it on my own, and I don't think that's going to work in this new reality. So it's a lot that I kind of put out there, but I think it's that this last piece of like, while we're while we're stabilizing in the now, it's like, how do we be with this energy that wants to create chaos and separation? And it's almost like the water, it's like people don't even
Hmm.
can't see hate until it's festering before it ever ends up in violence. So how do we be with that in a way that we be with what is, and be part of this team of co-creating and reimagining, um, while both are happening
At
simultaneously.
this, yeah, it's a great, it's a great exposition and a great question, Christine, because it's not simple. Um, And I think that's for myself where I go back to what our well, shift it. Our mind tends to go up.
Mm,
Okay, our feelings, um, relaxation takes us down into our body. When we're stressed, we go up here. We go up into the, into this place of mind. And when we're not stressed, we start to go down into body. I pay a whole lot of attention to how does my body respond at this moment in time? What's going on in my body? Because change is a process, not an event. Life is a process. We tend to think of it as events. Like, how do I do this? How do I change that? Rather than how do I embody within myself the life that I want to live? How do I embody whatever my own understanding or beliefs are about the laws of life that are in alignment with life? How do I live that today? Knowing that I'm not going to be perfect, you know, that I'm going to have those days where it's like, okay, I surrender, or all day, this is too much, or all day, or okay, the feels like the dark forces are taking over because you know, if I watch much on media, like Firehawk and I stopped watching a television show the other night, because it was like, this is going into a place of darkness and violence that I don't need to experience. I don't want to experience. I don't want to subject my being to that. I want to and this is where it's tricky. It's like, how do I be mindful and not in sort of la la land about what's going on out here, because that has a reality. But in my world, in my belief, and I'm betting my life on it,
mm,
that way of being is diminishing on Earth, if for no other reason. It's not life sustaining. Life will not allow it. Life can't continue in that way. Now, that's not to say that it may get a whole lot worse on Mother Earth before it gets better. But that's in a scope or a level that I personally can't change. I can't change the overall thing, but what I can change and what I can model, what I can work towards creating is, how do I choose to live? What kind of community do I want to be a part of? And how do we work together in embodying what we believe? Because the change doesn't come from some book that says this is how you do it. They can be helpful, but it doesn't come from that. It's like, okay, now that I understand it, but how do I do it? How do I do it? How do I embody it? And how do I make those little steps, on a daily basis? I mean, you talk about the things that you do, and yet there's still days, and it's like, I have those too. I mean, I have those days. I got sick in January. I never get sick. I got sick in January for 2 weeks. I had a fever that wouldn't disappear. And they're doing all kinds of tests, and they said, no, it's not this, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And it was like, just take a time out, Pele.
mhm,
You need to rest. There's more going on than your body can integrate, than your body can handle. And so paying attention to our bodies, and those of you who are old enough know that certainly in some traditions, the body is seen as, like, the source of great sin. The body is seen as, oh, that's all about, that's what women do. They're weak. The body is, we're supposed to transcend the body. Well, it's like, the only way that we build a new world is to embody what it is, the ways that we want to live. That's how we do it. And for me, it's about staying aware. I'm very aware of what's going on in our government, in the world. I mean, that's my responsibility, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't put my energy in trying to change something that I can't change. Where I put my energy into is myself, my family, my community, and into being in supportive relationship as much as possible with everyone that I come into contact with, because that matters. I mean, if everything is connected, if everything is interrelated, then who I am with you, a person I meet on the street, that matters. That may change this person's life, or it may just simply allow them to get through the day without committing suicide. We never know. We never know what our impact can be, and it's our job to be the instrument that we are and to co-create in whatever way we are to co-create, and to do that with others and to give thanks to life. And when we get out of tune, what happens? If you're a musician, you stop and you retune the instrument. Well, we got to do the same thing. We got to remember, how do I retune myself? For me, I sleep, I go for a walk in nature, I hang out with my kids or my grandkids, I meditate. I know those things that remind me of who I am and of this larger movement that's going on in the world. It's really helpful to look at the fact that creation is an ongoing process. It's not something that happened in the past. It's happening right now in this moment. And I am a part of that. And what I do matters and creates something that didn't exist before.
What who I am matters, and what I do and be creates something that didn't exist before.
That's right. And this is a whole other realm, but it goes backward and forward in time. So it does impact what's possible here, but it also heals what happened there in the past, because if things are not separate, there is a whole other territory. But it
Feel
does
like we'll be back
it
talking about the continuum of time. Um,
it does
yeah,
bring up this
yeah.
this place of love, of life, bringing all unlike itself to be healed. And if we remember, that's what's going on right now, and it wouldn't be going on if we weren't capable of holding it. It's like, one of the feminine power is to hold an energetic basket in which the chaos has enough space to land and to reshape itself into a form that is life-giving.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of what we can do, and we don't need anybody's permission. We don't need a certain job. It's much more, an inside job of ourselves, of becoming that basket that's capable of holding whatever comes to us. And in those times, when we're not able to do that, of recognizing that and saying, it's like, okay, I need a timeout. I need to care for my own basket now, and then I'll go back out into the larger world and
Mhm.
hold this larger
Mhm.
basket.
Yeah. Yeah, as we just wrap this up, the word that's coming to me is presence.
Yeah. Yes. Because presence, the moment, is
Mhm,
the only place of power.
mhm.
This moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I appreciate your piece of time, of understanding it is the invisible things that will never make TikTok or Instagram that make all of the difference, and feeling that energy of, present that we're looking for. I think that's what I'm taking from today, of thinking of this weekend. We were walking around after lunch with Noah's sister, and there was some people doing stuff with cleaning up the forest and stuff like that. There's beautiful forests out here in Western North Carolina. I'm like, "Oh, let's go over there." And I just started talking to one of the volunteers just to let her talk, and then I just
Yeah.
and then I just appreciated her. I'm like, I didn't give him any, money. I took a little picture of a thing. I didn't feel like, oh, I have to give them money in order to. I'm like, thank you so much for what you are doing.
Mhm.
And just let her talk about all the different things. And I could just feel that mattering in the moment. And then it mattered to me because then I felt connected. Like, I'm like, look, the humans are doing things. Like there's like 500 people who are going out to the forest, not my part, but there's 500 people that are going out to
Yeah.
the forest. And that's what gives, I think this like the that gives me hope. And we call them hope biscuits, like in England where they have the tea and then you have the biscuits.
Mhm.
It's like, this is like hope biscuits, and we need these hope biscuits and going out and eating. There's no calories, but it was like
Yeah.
that seeing that there are so many people that are doing beautiful things that don't make it onto the screen, and
Mhm.
placing ourselves in connection to feel that, I think is an important practice of our time.
That place of appreciation, I've made it a practice to right now there's a whole lot of construction going on in Santa Cruz where I live, and when I'm out walking, I stop and ask the guys, okay, what are you fixing today? Or what are you making more beautiful today or more
Mhm.
functional, And then first of all, they're surprised because they used to be criticized because they're slowing down traffic or whatever else. But then it's like, I enter into these amazing conversations and like you can just feel them getting bigger. Like, wow, I matter. My job matters. And that's our job. I mean, is to encourage one another, appreciate one another, to hold hands while we go through this time. Because, well, it's a lot more fun, and it matters. It really, really matters.
Mm. Well, thank you, Pele, for I think I don't even have any other words, like that part that you just ended us on, like the connection really, really, really matters. So
Mm,
simple, so simple. I guess our presence really is enough.
yeah, it is. It is enough. We are enough. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Pele. Thank you so much. And just wrapping everyone up in the basket of co-creation, with us, that we are all co-creators here, weaving together, and to remember that. Okay, y'all, as we wind up here, I wanted to just give us a chance for any of you that are interested in connecting with Pele and continue to keep that conversation going. I asked her to share a little bit about the work that she has going on, from this point forward. So tune in, and she'll also share where you can connect with her at. And then we'll sign off for today. So here she is. So Pele, you said that you're betting your life on. Um, you're betting your life that life is going to take care of itself and us within it, and who knows what the time span is. But most people who are in their 80s think that they have to be retired, and you you live your life and you are yourself, and I'm just curious what you're excited about giving your life, giving your energy to in these coming years, in addition, to your family. And but what are you excited about giving your life to, and how can people connect in with you, around that?
I think that the wisdom that I have gained in my life has come from three things of the hard sciences, um, mysticism, and indigenous wisdom. Because I find when those three things are in alignment, then I'd bet my life on it being true. So and I've had different teachers um, that have just impacted my life profoundly. And so what I'm giving my life to these days, and I have been for the last 35 years, is indigenous wisdom, the practices, the concepts, the tools, the structure of it, because they are tools, structures, practices that are in alignment with the laws of life, with the laws of creation. And I feel like as humans, we've largely forgotten how to be human together. And we're in the process of remembering how to be human together. And so these tools, these concepts, this way of life that of wisdom that Indigenous peoples carries is, I think, exactly what will benefit the world. It's one of the things. It's a gift that I can give, and that's what. And Firehawk and I work, my husband and I work in ceremony to do that. And so we're in the process right now of beginning a 2 or 3 year training for people who want to learn not just the what it is, because the what is like, in one sense, that's the simple piece, but it's like, how do we embody it? How do we learn to live in a way in alignment with the laws of life, with the laws of source? How do we do that? And of course, there are traditions that we've tried to kill in the world, or to exterminate in the world, that have done exactly that for thousands of years. And they have a lot to teach us if we have the willingness to listen and to learn. So that's what I'm about.
Yay. Yay. And I will put I'll put the URL in the show notes. Oh, how people find you on the internet.
Center for Timeless Earth Wisdom.org. That's how they find us. Center for Timeless Earth Wisdom.org.